So there are concerns over the rise in bullying incidents in schools across the country. In the latest incident that sent shockwaves across the country, a grade 8 pupil in Delft in the Western Cape was subjected to a brutal act of bullying. The young boy was reportedly shoved face first into a toilet bowl. The Basic Education Minister Siviwe Gwarube recently disclosed alarming statistics revealing that since the start of the 2025 academic year, over 500 cases of bullying have been reported in South African schools, with Limpopo recording the highest number of incidents. To discuss this growing crisis, we're in conversation now with Siviwe Gwarube, the Minister of Basic Education. Minister, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. I was just looking at the timeline and in responding to that question. So looking at from the 15th of January up until the 14th, when the minister was responding to this question, you have over 500 cases, 548 in total cases that have been reported. So which means that all of that happened with just in a month. And this is the period where the schools had just opened.
Absolutely. Aldrin, it is a growing pandemic in our schools. And the way that in which firstly, I think it's important for us that we've made some headway in saying that schools have to log these incidents so that we may be able to provide statistics like we have. That's the first instance. The second instance is obviously to say to schools, is your code of conduct up to date? Is your SGB ensuring that your code of conduct is up to date? Because children who are bullying other children in school have to meet the punishment that is there. They have to be disciplined. And if it means that they have to be expelled in accordance to the law, then they have to be expelled. Then the third element, Aldrin, which is also particularly concerning, is the issue particularly around violence inside of schools and outside of schools. So there's the bullying aspect, which is a code of conduct issue. And in response to that, as I said, we are tracking that, but also we've launched a campaign around an anti-bullying campaign, which we are rolling out across the country as DBE to assist provinces. But then there's a second element around violence inside of schools. And at the end of last year, Minister Mchunu and our departments have been working closely to find a protocol in which we're going to be working together. Because in his crime statistics, he's able to now show us exactly where incidents of violence are happening, in which schools, in which provinces, and we're able to pinpoint. And I'm really excited to be able to work with him and make some announcements in the coming weeks about what we're going to be doing with those hotspot areas in schools. But we have to make sure that schools are places of safety and not places where children are subjected to bullying.
Yeah, and then Limpopo accounts for around 56% of all of these incidents. One province, and by the way, KwaZulu-Natal as well as Gauteng, they have the largest population of students, very, very far from the amount of the population that Limpopo has. But look at these incidents. What is this telling us about the province? Have you looked into it as yet?
Mm-hmm. Look, I mean, I think firstly, it's pointing to a broader problem, and the MEC and the team is working together with us to firstly find out where are these incidents of bullying happening, which schools are they happening in, and how are the principals responding to these things? Because, of course, as I said, there's a code of conduct issue, which is a conduct issue in the school, but also there are criminal elements that are creeping up in our schools. For instance, the issue around the child in Delft, for instance, the grade 8 pupil, the province has already started, firstly, in launching a full investigation and helping the school deal with that, because it's not just a code of conduct thing. When you are shoving another child's face in a toilet bowl, I mean, that is violence, Aldrin, and it has to be dealt with harshly so that it can also show the other children and the other learners that this will not be tolerated in our schools. We can't have these kind of incidents because they do affect the quality of learning and teaching that happens in our schools. And also, it means that teachers are more preoccupied with trying to keep a safe environment in schools than being able to make sure that they're spending more time in the classroom. So we are going to be making sure that we are supporting provinces from a national point of view and also in conjunction with the Minister of Police.
Does this mean that public schools are not safe?
Look, I mean, public schools have been under a tremendous amount of pressure. You'll recall that there was a spike in extortion cases, particularly at the end of last year, which is what prompted me to go to the Minister of Police and say, look, we do need help. At the end of the day, in as much as principals in schools are there to uphold the code of conduct of the school, but if learners are coming into schools with dangerous elements, with drugs, with weapons, we need help to make sure that schools are areas of safety. And it was encouraging for me, for Minister Mchunu to say, we are ready to help with the National Commissioner. We are going to say to you, we're going to show you where the crime statistics are coming from, and we will make sure that we have a targeted approach to those schools. Because also, Aldrin, the problem also becomes is that there are about 2,000 police stations in South Africa. We've got 24,000 schools. So initially, the department was trying to partner every couple of schools with a police station, but it's not working. We need to have a targeted approach that is data-led. And so that's why I'm saying I'm encouraged by the Minister of Police that him and I are going to be making this announcement, particularly in a place like the Western Cape, where there's even gang violence activity that is sometimes playing itself out in our schools. So this is one going to be dealt with very harshly inside the school, but also we want to support schools with the support of the police.
All right. And then just quickly, Minister, on current affairs related issues. So the basic education Lekgotla happened yesterday. One of the issues that was raised was around budget constraints. I want to quickly zoom into KwaZulu-Natal. They've raised issues before in terms of budget constraints, whether it is around infrastructure or whether it is even with the appointment of teachers. But now with this recent inclement weather that has been experienced in the province, have you received any updates yet around how many schools have been affected and what the response of the Department of Basic Education is going to be, considering that you also have some children that aren't going to school because of the devastation that has taken place?
We've been assured by the province, firstly, Aldrin, that there is a targeted response to some of those children who have been affected by the displacement. But I think the broader issue that you raised, particularly around KZN, is a concerning one. You'll recall at the end of last year, I mean, the province has been quite clear about the fact that they're unable to meet their financial obligations. Of course, this has been a huge point of discussion between myself and the Minister of Finance, because, of course, the reality is that we want to protect frontline services and we want to keep classroom sizes as reasonably small as possible so that we can make sure that quality learning and teaching happens. And so KZN is the top of my priority list in terms of my risk register, because the province is under tremendous amount of pressure financially. And there was even a point at which we were not entirely sure that we would be able to make sure that they are running internal exams at the end of last year. But the province has pushed. They managed to produce really, really good results. And so they've got my support in trying to plug those gaps. And the critical things there, Aldrin, is to making sure that we've got enough teachers in the classroom. And number two, obviously supporting them with infrastructure challenges like we are in other parts of the country.
Yeah, teachers, infrastructure, and then comes the question around furniture. You have responded to this issue around the foldable desks. Which converts into a backpack as well. The Member of Parliament, Musi Mamani, has said that the minister, he will be sending a formal request for the minister to submit the scientific study that you're referring to yesterday, as well that UNESCO has endorsed this particular product. Will minister be doing that?
Look, as I said, I mean, I think as I was responding to the question yesterday, that firstly, I think this has been something that has been innovated with in South Africa, that has been endorsed by the Department of Science and Technology, but also has been endorsed by UNESCO as something that can be used by learners who particularly don't have workspaces in their homes. And I think it's also important to point out, I think there's been some misconception. Number one, Aldrin, I have to make it this a point that in our public schooling, there are about over 2 million pieces of furniture that we still are short of. Over and above that, it doesn't mean that when corporate partners come in and want to assist us, that it negates our responsibility as a department to provide working stations and desks and furniture in schools. And so I think perhaps that's the misconception where people are saying, are you then simply outsourcing your responsibility? We are not outsourcing our responsibility, but there are children, Aldrin, who go to homes where they don't have a workstation to come and do their homework, where they don't have maybe electricity, where they can be able to now to have a solar powered light, where they can sit and have a workstation where they can do their homework. So this is about supplementing and not replacing. And this is not about saying we're negating our responsibility. But I want to say this. This conversation has also sparked a deeper conversation within the DBT around branding. And that is something that I want us to have a policy on how do we brand, how do corporates brand their items in schools? Because I think that is a valid criticism, and that is something that we need to look at.
All right. And your take on some people arguing that you can't have children this young and this little having to pull this particular foldable chair from home to school, from school back home. Other kids don't have that extra chore. What's Minister's take on it? Is this a dignified way to say to the poor that, listen, you don't have a desk at school, so this is what we are offering you?
Also, I'm not saying that you don't have a desk at school. We're simply saying that this is here to supplement while we are meeting the growing demand of furniture in our schools. That's the first thing. Because to say that you don't have a desk at school, therefore you need to cart your desk around is incorrect. Number two, it's also important to note that this is optional. If a child does want to say, I have a workstation, that I don't have a workstation at home, and I would like to be able to have one where I can comfortably do my homework in a way that is academically conducive, then they are able to do that. The second thing, Aldrin, is that this, for me, I mean, this design of this desk has been turns into a desk, but also it can be a school bag. And therefore, that's why I was referring to the scientific endorsement by UNESCO that says, is it appropriate for kids that age to be carrying this around? And they've assured us that, yes, this kind of intervention has been used before, and it is appropriate. But once again, this is a supplementary measure. It is not to negate our responsibility to provide furniture in schools, and rather to say to kids who aren't able to have conducive workspaces at home that this is something that you can use. And it's not to say that children are now forced to cart this around.
Well, there are, isn't it, Minister, that once the child decides that they're going to take the desk, they'll have to cart it around between home and back to school. And other children, your middle-class children, they don't have to do that.
No, they don't. But that's the inequality, Aldrin, that we have in our country that we need to urgently rectify. Of course, middle-class children don't have a situation where they don't have a workstation at home, where they'll have power in their homes, where they'll have a workstation that is conducive for their learning environment. Yes, of course, that is the inequality we're talking about, because the children who, in the rural Eastern Cape, they don't have that luxury. But what do I do right now? I partner with people who are saying we are trying to bridge that gap while we are fixing the inequality in South Africa. I don't think that as a department, we should simply sit back and say, well, we're not going to do anything until we fix the broader inequality in South Africa. There is an inequality problem. You are absolutely right, where there are kids who don't have to have a portable desk, then they have access to these things. But that's a socioeconomic issue that we have to deal with. And so I'm saying here is a solution. Yes, not ideal, but perhaps you can take the desk home, keep it at home, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you will not have a desk at school, and that departments of basic education in the provinces have a responsibility to provide desks as and when needed. This is not about replacing our responsibility or outsourcing our responsibility.
All right, thank you so much for your time. Siviwe Gwarube is the Minister of Basic Education.